She was accused of stealing a key she had never touched. Then her own son told her, "You're grounded until you apologize to my wife." But instead of apologizing, she started investigating. What she discovered inside an abandoned family theater exposed a secret worth millions and proved that the missing key was only the beginning. Watch until the end to discover who was really behind the accusation. If you enjoy family betrayal, shocking secrets, and satisfying justice, subscribe and follow for more stories. My name is Aloan Viral, and at 64, I believed I had already learned the hardest lessons a mother could learn. I was wrong. My son, Kalen Viral, was 37. He had always been serious, careful, and protective of the people he loved. His wife, Surya Quill, was different. She was charming when she wanted something and extremely convincing when she wanted someone to believe her version of events. For 3 years, I had tried to maintain a peaceful relationship with her. Then, on a rainy Thursday evening, everything changed. I was standing in Kalen's kitchen, preparing coffee, when Surya suddenly opened the drawer beneath the coffee machine. She stared inside. "Where is it?" I turned around. "Where is what?" "The silver key." "I don't know." She searched the drawer again, then looked at me. "It was here yesterday." I placed my cup on the counter. "I haven't touched your things." She didn't answer. Instead, she called for Kalen. He entered the kitchen less than a minute later. Surya pointed toward the drawer. "Your mother took it." I actually laughed. Not because I found the accusation funny, but because I genuinely thought she was joking. Kalen didn't laugh. He looked at me. "Mom, did you take Surya's key?"
No.
"She's saying she saw you near this drawer." I was making coffee. That's why I was standing here. Surya crossed her arms. "The key opens the storage room at the old Viral Theater." That sentence immediately caught my attention. The Viral Theater had belonged to my late husband and me. We had closed it 12 years earlier. After my husband's death, the property eventually passed to Kalen. I had recently agreed to help him restore the building. Surya continued. "There are documents in that storage room that belong to my family." I frowned. "What documents?" She looked at Kalen.
See?
She's pretending she doesn't know. My son sighed. "Mom, if you took it, just give it back." "I didn't take anything." Surya's voice became sharper. "You've been trying to control that property since Kalen inherited it." That accusation hurt more than I expected. I looked at my son. "Do you believe that?" He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. Then he said something I never imagined hearing from him. "You're grounded until you apologize to her." For several seconds, I simply stared at him. "I'm 64 years old. I don't care." "Kalen, I'm your mother. And she's my wife." His answer was immediate. He pointed toward the guest room. "Stay there until you admit what you did." I felt my hands begin to tremble, but I kept my voice steady. "I don't have her key." "Then apologize for accusing her of lying." "I won't apologize for something I didn't do." Surya turned away, pretending to cry. That was when I understood that this wasn't an argument. It was a setup. I picked up my handbag. "I'm leaving." Kalen stepped toward the door. "You're not going anywhere until this is resolved." I looked directly into his eyes. "I am not running away." I opened the door. "I am going to find out why your wife's missing key suddenly matters so much." The rain had become heavier by the time I reached my car. I sat behind the steering wheel, without starting the engine. For the first time that evening, I allowed myself to think clearly. Why did Surya care about one old key? Why did she know exactly what room it opened? And why had Kalen reacted as though I had committed a serious crime? The next morning, I drove straight to the old Viral Theater. I had no idea that the answers waiting inside that abandoned building would completely change what I believed about my son's marriage. And I certainly didn't know that the person who stole the key had never intended to keep it. By the time I reached the Viral Theater the next morning, the rain had stopped, but the pavement was still wet. I parked beside the old brick building and sat in my car for a moment. I had not returned there alone in years. My husband, Alaric, and I had spent most of our married life inside that theater. We had hosted plays, concerts, school performances, and community events. After his death, I couldn't bring myself to walk through the doors. But that morning I had a reason. I unlocked the front entrance. The smell of dust and old wood immediately filled the lobby. Everything looked exactly as I remembered it, except for one thing. Someone had been inside recently. I noticed fresh footprints near the ticket booth. I stopped. The theater had been closed for years. There was no reason for anyone to be walking around inside. I checked the office. The door was slightly open. I pushed it wider. Drawers had been pulled out. Papers covered the floor. Several filing cabinets were open. Someone had searched the room. I immediately called Merritt Dask, a retired municipal surveyor who had worked with Alaric decades ago. He arrived 40 minutes later carrying his old leather measuring case. "What happened?" he asked. "Someone broke in." He looked around without touching anything. "They weren't looking for money." "How do you know?" "Because the old cash drawer is still here." He pointed toward the filing cabinets. "They were looking for documents." My stomach tightened. "What kind of documents?" "Property records, surveys, contracts, anything that could establish ownership or access rights." I told him about Suraya's accusation. When I mentioned the missing key, Merritt stopped examining the cabinets. "What does the key open?" "The storage room." "What's in there?" "I don't know."
He looked at me.
"That's exactly what worries me." We walked toward the storage area. The door was locked. I tried my own key. It opened. Inside were broken chairs, old theater signs, boxes of costumes, and several pieces of equipment that had not been used in more than a decade. Merritt walked slowly around the room. Then he stopped. "Eloan, look at this." He pointed to a section of wall near the back. There were fresh scratches around a wooden panel. Someone had tried to remove it. I touched the damaged edge. Why would anyone search behind a wall? Merritt didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked, "Has anyone approached Kalen about buying this property?" I nodded. "A developer." "Who?" I told him. Merritt's expression changed. "Northmere Urban Holdings?" "Yes."
He stared at me.
"That's Orson Quill's company." I felt my chest tighten. Suraya's uncle. The man I had met only twice. Why would he want the theater? Merritt walked toward the window overlooking the neighboring hotel. "Look outside." I did. A massive construction project was underway next door. Merritt pointed toward it. "That hotel is expanding." "So, they're building an underground loading area." I still didn't understand. "What's that got to do with my theater?" "The access route." He explained that the hotel's construction plan appeared to depend on a narrow strip of land belonging to the theater. If they don't have legal access, the project could be delayed or redesigned. Could that cost them money? Millions. I stared at the hotel. Suddenly, the missing key didn't seem like a family dispute anymore. It looked like part of a business strategy. That afternoon, I drove to the county records office. I requested every document connected to the theater's property boundaries. The clerk returned with a thick folder. Inside was an old access agreement dated nearly 30 years earlier. It gave the neighboring property limited access across a narrow section of theater land. Then I found something else. A cancellation notice. According to the document, the access agreement had supposedly been terminated years ago. There was a signature at the bottom. My husband's signature. I stared at it. Something was wrong. Alaric had been in the hospital on the exact date shown on the document. He couldn't have signed it. I called Merritt immediately. His voice became serious when I told him, "Don't confront anyone yet." "Why?" "Because if that signature is forged, someone's been planning this for a long time." I looked down at the document. My hands were shaking. Someone had searched the theater. Someone had taken Suraya's key. Someone had created a document that could change the value of the property by millions of dollars. And somehow, my son had been pushed into believing that I was the thief. I closed the folder. For the first time, I realized something far more frightening than being accused. Someone wanted me to stop asking questions. And I had just decided to ask more. I left the county records office just before 4 in the afternoon. The forged signature was still on my mind. I could not understand why anyone would risk creating a false document just to control an abandoned theater. Unless, of course, the theater was worth far more than Kalen, and I had realized. I decided to speak to my son. When I arrived at Kalen's house, his car was in the driveway. I knocked. He opened the door, but didn't invite me inside. Mom, I need 5 minutes. I don't think this is a good time. Then give me 3. He looked exhausted. Finally, he stepped aside. I placed the county document on the kitchen table. Look at the date. He picked it up. His eyes moved across the page. What am I looking at? Your father's signature. So, your father was in the hospital that day. Kalen looked at me. Are you sure? I was sitting beside his bed. He looked at the paper again. For the first time since the accusation, I saw doubt on his face. Before he could say anything, Soraya entered the kitchen. She stopped when she saw the document. Where did you get that? County records. Her face became pale. Kalen noticed. Soraya, do you know what this is?
No.
Her answer came too quickly. I watched her carefully. She wasn't surprised by the document. She was afraid of it. Who told you about the storage room? I asked. She stared at me. What?
The key.
You knew exactly what it opened. It's common knowledge. No, it isn't. Kalen stepped between us. Mom, enough. I turned toward him. Ask her where Orson Quill was yesterday. Soraya's expression changed. Kalen looked confused. Why would I ask that? Because his company is trying to buy this property. Soraya immediately interrupted. Uncle Orson has nothing to do with this. I hadn't even accused him. That was my first real clue. I picked up my bag. I'll leave. Kalen followed me to the door. Mom. I stopped. Why are you doing this? Because someone is lying to you. He lowered his voice. I don't know who to believe anymore. I looked at him. Then don't believe anyone. Find evidence. I left. That evening, I received a message from an unknown number. It said, you don't know what you're looking for. Stop before someone gets hurt. Asterisk, asterisk. I read it 3 times. Then another message arrived. The key was never the real target. I immediately called the number. It was disconnected. I saved the messages. The next morning, I received another message. This time, the sender gave a name. Tamsin Rook. She asked me to meet her at a cafe across town. I arrived early. Tamsin was young, perhaps 26. She wore a gray coat and kept looking toward the entrance as though she expected someone to follow her. You know who I am? She asked. Yes. I worked for Northmere Urban Holdings. My stomach tightened. She placed a folder on the table. I quit 3 weeks ago. Why? Because I found out what they were doing. I opened the folder. Inside were printed emails. Several were from Orson Quill. One instructed an employee to prepare a property report stating that the theater had no active access restrictions. Another mentioned Kalen by name. I continued reading. Then I found Soraya's name. I looked up. What was she doing in these emails? Tamsin lowered her voice. Orson paid her. My heart sank. Paid her for what? To convince your son to sell the theater. I couldn't speak for several seconds. Tamsin pushed another document toward me. It was a draft purchase agreement. The proposed price was ridiculously low, but there was a private clause attached to it. If the sale went through, Orson's company would gain development rights worth several $1 million. Kalen had never mentioned that. Tamsin leaned closer. There's more.
What?
Orson wanted the storage room cleared before the county reviewed the property. I remembered the damaged wooden panel. Why? I don't know. She hesitated. But I know someone was ordered to find something inside. I looked at the documents again. The missing key. The forged signature. The theater. The secret payment. Everything was beginning to connect. But there was still one question I couldn't answer. If Soraya was working with Orson, why had she accused me of stealing the key? Tamsin looked directly at me. Because Orson needed your son to stop trusting you. My blood ran cold. I suddenly understood. The accusation had never been about a missing key. It had been designed to isolate me from Kalen. And if that was true, then whoever was behind this was much more dangerous than I had first imagined. I spent the entire night reading the documents Tamsin had given me. By sunrise, I had reached one conclusion. I could no longer protect Kalen from the truth simply because the truth would hurt him. He needed to know. I called him and asked him to meet me at the Viral Theater. He arrived just after 9. He looked exhausted. I almost didn't come, he said. I know. Did you find something? I handed him the folder. Read it. He opened the first page. His expression changed almost immediately. What is this? Northmere's purchase agreement. He read the proposed price. Then he looked at me. That's impossible. Keep reading. His eyes moved down the page. He reached the private development clause. He stopped. Why would they get development rights? Because the theater's access agreement is worth far more than the property itself. He sat on one of the old theater seats. I didn't know. I know. He continued reading. Then he saw the emails. His face became pale. Soraya knew about this? Yes. He shook his head.
No.
I didn't argue. Instead, I played the recording I had found inside the hidden compartment. My husband's voice filled the empty theater. If this recording is ever heard, someone may be attempting to alter the property records. Kalen stared at the old recorder. His father continued. The access agreement was never legally canceled. Any document claiming otherwise should be treated as fraudulent. The recording ended. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then Kalen whispered, Dad knew. Yes. Why didn't he tell me? Because he died before he could. Kalen covered his face. I sat beside him. There's something else. I handed him the payment records. He read the entries. Then he saw Soraya's name. His hands started shaking. She took money from Orson. Yes. He stood abruptly. I'm calling her. Before he could reach his phone, the theater doors opened. Soraya walked inside. She looked directly at the folder in Kalen's hands. Where did you get that? Kalen turned toward her. Did Orson pay you? She froze. I watched her carefully. For the first time, she had no immediate answer. Kalen, please. Did he? Her eyes filled with tears. Yes. Kalen closed his eyes. How much? 20,000. I expected him to shout. He didn't. His silence was worse. Why? Soraya looked at me. Because your mother was going to ruin everything. I stood. I was trying to stop a property fraud. I didn't know it was fraud at first. But you accused me of stealing. I was told to. By Orson. She nodded. Then she revealed something that neither Kalen nor I expected. I never took the key. Kalen stared at her. What? Orson took it. When? 2 days before I accused your mother. She explained that Orson had entered the house while she was away. He had access because Kalen had given him a spare key months earlier. He removed the silver key from the drawer. Then he told Soraya to accuse me of taking it. Why? Because he needed Kalen to believe you were trying to steal something from the theater. Kalen's face changed. You knew the entire time? I knew some of it. You let me punish my mother. Soraya began crying. I was scared. Of what? She looked down. Of Orson. I stepped forward. Then tell us everything. She finally did. Orson had promised her money if Kalen sold the theater. He had convinced her that the property was nearly worthless and that the development agreement was simply a technical issue. But when she discovered how much money the deal would make, she became frightened. She had tried to withdraw. Orson threatened to expose the payments. Kalen listened without interrupting. When she finished, he turned toward me. Mom. I waited. I'm sorry. I nodded. But I wasn't ready to forgive him. Sorry isn't enough. I know. He looked at the evidence again. Then what do we do? I answered immediately. We stop arguing with each other. I picked up the folder. And we let the evidence speak. The next morning, Kalen, Tamsin, Merritt, and I went to the county investigator. We brought every document. The forged signature, the original survey, the payment records, the emails, and the recording. The investigator examined everything carefully. Then, he asked one question. Do you know where the original property survey is? Merritt smiled. I do. He placed it on the table. The official seal was still intact. The investigator compared it with the forged cancellation. His expression changed. This cancellation could never have been valid. For the first time in months, I felt the pressure in my chest begin to disappear. We had finally reached the truth. But the truth was about to cost Orson Quill far more than he had expected. The county investigation moved faster than I expected. By the following Tuesday, an official notice had been placed on the entrance of the Viral Theater. All development activity connected to the neighboring hotel was suspended. I stood outside the building and read the notice twice. For months, I had felt as though someone was constantly pushing me backward. Now, for the first time, I felt that the ground beneath me was steady. But the story wasn't over. Orson Quill had hired an attorney, and he was not going down quietly. 2 days later, I received a letter accusing me of fabricating the evidence. The letter claimed that the property documents were unreliable, that my husband's recording had been manipulated, and that I had pressured Tamsin into giving a false statement. I wasn't surprised. What surprised me was what happened next. Kalen received a similar letter. The difference was that his letter contained something else. A photograph. It showed me standing outside the county records office. The message underneath, it was simple. Your mother is destroying your future. Kalen called me that evening. Mom, someone is trying to scare me. I know. Should we stop?
No.
There was silence. Then he said, I don't want to lose you again. You won't. We need to finish this. For the first time since the accusation, I heard confidence in his voice. The next morning, Tamsin contacted us. She had found another file. This one had been stored on an old company server. It contained internal projections for Northmere's hotel project. The numbers were shocking. If Orson gained access through the theater property, the value of his development would increase by nearly $12 million. But there was something even more important. The projections had been prepared 8 months before Orson approached Kalen. That meant the plan had existed long before I knew about it. The accusation against me had not been an emotional reaction. It had been planned. Merritt helped us prepare the original survey and historical records. The county investigator added them to the case. Then came the hearing. Orson arrived wearing an expensive suit. He looked calm. Too calm. His attorney argued that the entire dispute was a family disagreement. A mother is angry because her son wants to sell inherited property, the attorney said. I almost smiled. That was exactly the story Orson wanted everyone to believe. Then the investigator presented the forged cancellation. He placed the original survey beside it. The signatures were compared. The dates were checked. The hospital records were introduced. My husband had been unconscious when the cancellation was supposedly signed. The room became quiet. Then Tamsin testified. She described the emails. She described Orson's instructions. She described the pressure placed on Surya. Finally, Kalen spoke. He told the investigator exactly what had happened in his home. He admitted that he had believed his wife, without checking the facts. He admitted that he had ordered me to remain inside the house. And then he said something that made me look at him. I was wrong. Orson's attorney tried to interrupt, but Kalen continued. My mother was accused because someone wanted me to distrust her. I helped them do it. His voice shook. But I will not help them anymore. The investigation ended several weeks later. Orson's company was found to have submitted fraudulent property documents. His development rights were suspended. Several investors withdrew from the project. Then came the financial consequence. Because the hotel had planned its entire expansion around the disputed access route, the project had to be redesigned. The redesign cost millions. Northmere could no longer afford the original plan. The company collapsed within months. Orson was required to repay money connected to the fraudulent transactions. He also faced separate legal proceedings related to other properties. His reputation disappeared almost overnight. But the greatest consequence wasn't financial. People who had trusted him stopped returning his calls. Business partners walked away. Employees resigned. The man who had tried to make me look like a thief became known for the fraud he had committed. As for Surya, she returned the money and cooperated with the investigation. She and Kalen separated. I didn't celebrate their separation. There was nothing satisfying about watching my son lose his marriage. But I refused to pretend the betrayal had not happened. Kalen came to my house one Sunday afternoon. He stood on my porch for nearly a minute before speaking. "I owe you an apology." "You do?" I believed her. "Yes. I treated you like a criminal." I looked at him. "You did." He lowered his head. "I don't expect you to forgive me immediately." "I won't." He nodded. "But I want to earn your trust again." I opened the door wider. "Then start by telling the truth, even when the truth makes you uncomfortable." He stepped inside. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. It wasn't supposed to be. Trust doesn't return because someone says sorry once. It returns through actions. And Kalen finally understood that. Months later, the county returned the theater documents to me. I held them in my hands and realized something. Orson had spent years trying to gain control of a piece of land. In the process, he had lost his company, his reputation, his business relationships, and the trust of everyone around him. I had lost something too. For a while, I had lost my son's trust. But unlike Orson, I still had a chance to rebuild. And I intended to use it. A year passed after the investigation ended. The Viral Theater no longer looked abandoned. The broken seats had been repaired. The walls had been repainted. The old ticket booth had been restored. New lights had been installed along the entrance, and the empty lobby was finally filled with people again. I decided not to sell the property. Instead, I turned it into a community arts center. The first event was scheduled for a Saturday evening in October. I arrived early. As I walked through the theater, I remembered the morning I had first returned after Soraya accused me. Back then, the building had felt like evidence of everything I had lost. Now it felt like something I had saved. Merritt was already inside. He was checking the electrical panels. "You actually did it," he said. "I had good help." He smiled. "So, does that mean you're finally going to retire?" I laughed. "I've been trying to retire for 20 years. You aren't very good at it." Before I could answer, I heard footsteps behind us. Kalen entered carrying 2 boxes. He had changed over the past year. He was quieter, more patient. He no longer assumed that the loudest person in the room was automatically telling the truth. He placed the boxes on the floor. "These are the last of the theater archives." I opened one. Inside were old photographs, programs, and handwritten notes from performances my husband and I had hosted decades earlier. Kalen picked up a photograph. It showed him as a child, standing backstage beside his father. He smiled. "I barely remember this." "You were 7. I thought Dad was the greatest man alive." He knew.
Kalen looked at me.
"I wish I had asked you more about him." "You still can." He nodded. Then he became serious. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you still hate Soraya?" The question surprised me. I thought for a moment.
"No."
"Do you forgive her?" "Not completely." He accepted the answer. "She sent me a letter." "What did she say?" "She apologized." "Did you answer?" "Yes." "What did you say?" "I told her I hoped she learned from what happened." I looked at my son. And I told her I didn't want to reopen the relationship." I nodded. "That's reasonable." Kalen sat down. "I used to think forgiveness meant pretending nothing happened. It doesn't." "What does it mean to you?" I looked across the theater. "Knowing what happened, accepting that it happened, and deciding it won't control your future." He was quiet. Then he smiled. "I think I'm finally learning that." That evening, the theater opened its doors. Hundreds of people came. Children performed on the stage. Local artists displayed their work. Older residents told stories about the theater's history. Merritt sat in the front row. Kalen sat beside him. I stood backstage before the first performance. For a moment, I touched the old wooden wall. I thought about the night my son had told me I was grounded. I remembered standing in his kitchen while Soraya accused me of stealing. I remembered leaving in the rain. I remembered the anonymous messages, the forged document, the hidden recording, the county investigation. The day Kalen finally admitted he had been wrong. So much had happened because of one missing key. But the key had never really been the important thing. The important thing was what happened when someone tried to use a lie to separate a family. Orson had believed that fear would make everyone easier to control. He was wrong. The truth had survived because people eventually chose to examine the evidence. The consequences followed naturally. His company collapsed. His development plans failed. His reputation disappeared. He lost the control he had spent years trying to obtain. That was his karma. Mine was different. I got my theater back. I got my voice back. And slowly, I got my relationship with my son back. After the final performance, Kalen found me backstage. "I have something for you." He handed me a small wooden box. I opened it. Inside was the silver key. The same key that had started everything. I stared at it. "Where did you get this?" The investigator returned it. I picked it up. For months, that little piece of metal had represented an accusation. Now it represented something else. Proof that a lie could be challenged. Proof that I had been right to ask questions. Kalen smiled. "Keep it." "I will." He hugged me. This time, I hugged him back without hesitation. I had once believed the worst thing that could happen to a mother was being betrayed by her own child. I learned that wasn't true. The worst thing would have been allowing that betrayal to convince me that I no longer deserved to stand up for myself. I refused to do that. I never apologized for stealing something I had never taken. I never surrendered the property because someone wanted me frightened. And I never allowed shame to replace the truth. Today, the silver key sits beside my husband's photograph. It reminds me of one lesson I will never forget. When someone tells a lie about you, you do not have to destroy them to prove yourself. Sometimes, you simply have to remain calm, gather the facts, and let the truth do what lies never can. It speaks for itself, and eventually people hear it. If this story stayed with you until the end, subscribe for more stories about family betrayal, hidden schemes, unexpected twists, and the people who find the courage to stand up for themselves. And if you ever find yourself falsely accused, remember my story. You do not have to surrender your dignity just because someone demands an apology. Sometimes the strongest answer is simply this: I didn't do it and I will prove it.